The first-class cabin of Sovereign Airways, Flight 902, was supposed to be a sanctuary of silence and luxury. But at 30,000 feet, silence is fragile. When senior flight attendant Lucia Price looked at the woman in seat 1A, she didn't see the woman who had drafted the airline's entire code of conduct. She didn't see the double doctorate holder from Yale. She only saw a black woman she decided didn't belong. Lucia thought she was enforcing the rules. She had no idea she was speaking to the architect of her own destruction. This isn't just a story about bad service. It's a masterclass in karma. You might want to sit down for this one. The air inside JFK's Terminal 4 was thick with the scent of expensive coffee and the frenetic energy of the holiday rush. But Dr. Veronica Roche moved through the chaos like a ship cutting through fog. She wore a bespoke, cream-colored power suit, the kind of tailoring that whispered money rather than shouting it, and her hair was swept back in a flawless, natural bun. In her left hand, she gripped the handle of a vintage leather carry-on. In her right, she held a boarding pass that bore the coveted obsidian status emblem of Sovereign Airways. Veronica wasn't just a passenger. She was the managing partner at Roche, Galloway, and Keene, a crisis management firm that specialized in corporate restructuring. More specifically, for the last 8 months, she had been the lead external consultant for Sovereign Airways. She had spent hundreds of sleepless nights rewriting their HR protocols, their diversity mandates, and their zero-tolerance harassment policies. Today, she was flying to London to present the final ratified document to the board of directors. She was tired. Her bones felt heavy. All she wanted was a glass of sparkling water, the lie-flat seat she had paid $6,000 for, and 6 hours of silence. As she approached the gate agent, a harried young man named Kevin, glanced at her passport and then at her face. He blinked, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Perhaps he had seen her photo on the internal company newsletter regarding the upcoming merger, but he stayed professional. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Roche. You're in 1A today. Thank you for your continued patience with our new boarding protocols." "Thank you, Kevin," Veronica said, her voice a smooth, calm contralto. "Rough morning? You have no idea," he lowered his voice. "Crew scheduling is a nightmare. We've got a reserve crew flying the front cabin today. A bit edgy." Veronica gave him a sympathetic nod and walked down the jet bridge. She didn't think much of the comment. She had dealt with edgy crews before. She had fired edgy crews before. When she stepped onto the aircraft, the shift in atmosphere was immediate. The humidity dropped, the lighting softened to a calming violet hue. She turned left, toward the first-class cabin. Standing at the galley entrance was the senior cabin director. Her name tag read Lucia. She was tall, with a rigid posture and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It sat on her face like a decal. Lucia was busy rearranging champagne flutes and didn't look up as Veronica entered. "Good morning," Veronica said politely, stepping into the aisle. Lucia glanced up. Her eyes did not scan Veronica's face. They scanned her silhouette, her hair, and then settled on her carry-on bag. The smile vanished. "Boarding pass," Lucia said. It wasn't a question. It was a command, clipped and dry. Veronica paused. It was standard procedure to check passes, but the tone was usually welcoming, not accusatory. She held out the phone. Lucia didn't take the phone. She just peered at the screen without leaning in. "Seat 1A? Are you sure you scanned correctly at the gate?" "I'm quite sure," Veronica said, stepping past her to place her bag in the overhead bin. "Wait," Lucia snapped. She stepped out from the galley, blocking the aisle. "Let me see that again. The system has been glitching with upgrades all morning. We've had a lot of errors with staff travel and economy overflows." The implication hung in the air, heavy and rancid. Errors, overflows. Veronica held the phone steady, the QR code bright against the screen. "It's a paid fare, Lucia. Full fare, obsidian class." Lucia stared at the screen for a long, uncomfortable second. She couldn't find a flaw. She let out a short, sharp exhale through her nose. "Fine, put your bag up. But we're running out of overhead space, so if it doesn't fit easily, it's getting checked." The bin above seat 1A was completely empty. Veronica placed her bag inside with practiced ease, closed the bin, and sat down. She pulled out her noise-canceling headphones, determined to ignore the microaggression. She opened her laptop. On the screen was a document titled Sovereign Airways, Strategic Alignment and Conduct Policy 2026. Final draft. She was literally reading the rules of the airline. 5 minutes later, a man boarded. He was white, wearing a tracksuit and a baseball cap, looking disheveled and loudly talking on his phone. "Yeah, bro, I made it. First class, baby," the man shouted. Lucia rushed forward, her face transformed into a mask of obsequious charm. "Welcome aboard, sir. Let me take your jacket. Can I get you a pre-departure beverage? Champagne? Scotch?" She didn't ask for his boarding pass. Veronica watched over the rim of her reading glasses. The difference wasn't subtle. It was theatrical. The man in the tracksuit, whose name turned out to be Brad, was treated like a returning war hero. Veronica sat in silence, her request for water ignored. She pressed the call button. A soft ding echoed. Lucia appeared, but she didn't come to Veronica's seat. She stood at the front of the cabin, shouting across the row. "Yes? You need something?" "I'd like a glass of sparkling water, please," Veronica said, keeping her voice level. "We're busy with pre-flight checks," Lucia said dismissively. "I'll get to you when we're in the air." "Lower your window shade." Veronica took a deep breath. She reached into her bag and pulled out a notebook. She wrote down, 10:14 a.m., Flight 902, SCD Lucia Price, refusal of pre-flight service. Disparate treatment observed. She had no idea that Lucia was watching her write. And Lucia didn't like being watched. The flight pushed back from the gate 20 minutes late. Throughout the taxi and takeoff, the tension in the front cabin was palpable. Lucia moved through the aisle with aggressive efficiency, slamming lockers and responding to Veronica's requests with single-syllable grunts. Once the seatbelt sign pinged off, the service began. Or rather, the service began for everyone else. Lucia and a junior flight attendant, a nervous young woman named Chloe, began the meal service. Chloe seemed terrified. She kept glancing at Veronica with apologetic eyes, but Lucia hovered over her like a hawk, directing her away from seat 1A. "Serve, Mr. Henderson first," Lucia instructed loudly, pointing to the man in 2B. Then the Connors family. Veronica waited. 30 minutes passed. She saw trays of lobster thermidor and filet mignon go past. Finally, Lucia stopped at her row. "We're out of the lobster," Lucia said, staring at the bulkhead wall rather than Veronica's face. "And the beef? We have the pasta or the fruit plate." Veronica looked at the menu. "I pre-ordered the sea bass via the app 3 days ago. System didn't capture it," Lucia lied. It was a lazy lie. The manifest, which was sitting on the galley counter visible from Veronica's seat, clearly had VGML, sea bass, highlighted in green next to 1A. "I can see the manifest from here, Lucia," Veronica said, dropping the pretense of ignorance. "It's highlighted in green." Lucia's head snapped toward her. The mask of customer service dropped completely. She leaned in, placing one hand on the back of Veronica's seat, an invasion of personal space that violated 3 separate clauses of the safety manual. "Excuse me?" Lucia hissed. "Are you spying on my workspace?" "I am observing the cabin," Veronica replied, her voice cooling to absolute zero. "And I am observing that you are lying to a passenger." "Why?" Lucia stood up straight, smoothing her uniform. She looked around the cabin to ensure the other passengers were distracted by their movies. Then she looked down at Veronica with a sneer that was almost impressive in its cruelty. "Look," Lucia said, her voice low and venomous. "I don't know how you got this seat. Maybe it's miles, maybe it's an employee pass, maybe you know someone. But let's be honest. You're making the other passengers uncomfortable." Veronica blinked. The sheer audacity took her breath away for a microsecond. "I'm making them uncomfortable? By sitting here reading? You're out of place," Lucia said. She used the words like a weapon. "You don't fit the aesthetic of this cabin. You're agitated. You're writing things down. You're watching the crew. It's predatory behavior. It's aggressive. Aggressive, the oldest code word in the book. I am writing," Veronica said slowly, "because I am documenting your service failures." "That's exactly what I mean," Lucia interrupted, her voice rising so that the man in 2B turned to look. "You are threatening the crew. That is a federal offense. If you continue to harass me, I will have the captain turn this plane around, or I will have law enforcement waiting for you in London. Do you understand? You take the fruit plate, or you take nothing." Lucia turned on her heel and marched back to the galley, pulling the curtains shut with a violent swish. Veronica sat frozen. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it burned. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window. She saw the CEO of her own destiny looking back. She reached for her laptop again. She didn't open a movie. She opened the airline's internal directory, which she had access to via the secure VPN she had been given for her consultancy work. She typed in, Lucia Price, employment history. The file loaded, Lucia Price. 15 years seniority. 3 prior complaints for rude behavior. All dismissed by a union rep named Hank Doherty. Lucia was protected. She felt invincible. Veronica switched tabs to the document she was presenting in London. Section 4.2. Interaction with high-value clients. Section 7.1. Zero tolerance for racially motivated biases. She scrolled down to Section 12. Immediate termination protocols. Veronica picked up her phone. She was connected to the onboard Wi-Fi. She opened her email app and composed a new message. 2. Jonathan P. Reynolds, Chairman of the Board, Sovereign Airways. CC. Margaret Vane, VP of In-Flight Services, Legal Counsel. Subject. Urgent. Incident aboard Flight 902. Immediate policy violation. She didn't send it yet. She needed more. She needed Lucia to hang herself completely. Veronica stood up. She wasn't going to the bathroom. She was going to the galley. As she parted the curtains, Lucia and Chloe were talking. Lucia was laughing, holding a glass of the first-class champagne strictly forbidden for crew to consume. She's writing a diary, Lucia cackled, taking a sip. Can you believe it? I bet she's a nanny flying on her boss's points. They always act like queens when they get a taste of the front. Chloe looked uncomfortable. Lucia, she's really well dressed. And her bag is a Hermes. Are you sure we should? Quiet, Chloe. I've been flying since you were in diapers. I know the type. You have to put them in their place early, or they run you ragged. Veronica stepped fully into the galley. The space was small, claustrophobic. My place, Veronica said, her voice filling the small metal room, is seat 1A. And currently, your place is holding a glass of Dom Perignon 2018 while on duty. That's an immediate dismissal offense, Lucia. Article 9, Section C. Lucia froze. The glass slipped from her fingers. It didn't break. It bounced on the rubberized floor, spilling sticky, expensive champagne over Lucia's pristine shoes. Lucia looked at the spill, then back at Veronica. Her face went from shock to a shade of red that signaled imminent explosion. She didn't apologize. She didn't panic. She doubled down. You are stalking me, Lucia screamed. Get out of my galley. That's it. I'm calling the captain. Lucia grabbed the interphone handset. Captain, I have a disruptive passenger in first, row 1. Yes. She's intoxicated, she's aggressive, and she just forced her way into the galley and assaulted me. She threw a drink on me. Veronica watched, her face impassive. She pulled out her phone and stopped recording the voice memo she had started 10 seconds ago. You just made a false report to the flight deck, Veronica said softly. That's a felony. Lucia slammed the phone into the cradle. She smiled, a terrified, manic grin. It's your word against mine. And I have the uniform. Who do you think they're going to believe? The aggressive woman in 1A or the senior purser? We'll see, Veronica said. But Lucia, I wouldn't worry about the captain if I were you. I'd worry about who is waiting for us in London. Security is waiting for you, Lucia spat. No, Veronica corrected. The board of directors is waiting for me. And now, I think they'll be waiting for you too. Lucia laughed. A harsh, barking sound. The board? You think you know the board? Honey, sit down. Veronica turned and walked back to her seat. She sat down, fastened her seatbelt, and hit send on the email. Then, she waited for the karma to arrive. It wouldn't happen immediately. It would be a slow burn. But when it would hit with the force of a collapsing star. The cabin was silent, save for the low, constant drone of the engines and the clinking of silverware as other passengers ate their meals, blissfully unaware of the war being waged in the galley. But the silence was heavy, charged with static. Veronica sat motionless. She had not touched her fruit plate. She had opened her laptop, but she wasn't working. She was waiting. 10 minutes later, the cockpit door clicked open. Captain Roger Banks emerged. He was a man in his late 50s, silver-haired, with the weary, authoritative set of a man who had flown too many red-eyes and dealt with too many drunks. He didn't look happy. He adjusted his cap, pulled down his tunic, and walked straight to the galley where Lucia was waiting. Lucia was blotting her uniform with a napkin, her eyes rimmed with red. She was putting on a masterclass performance of the traumatized employee. She whispered frantically to the captain, gesturing wildly toward seat 1A. Veronica watched them through the gap in the seats. She saw the captain nod, his jaw tightening. He turned and walked down the aisle, stopping at row 1. He loomed over Veronica, blocking the overhead light. "Ma'am," Captain Banks said. His voice was hard, lacking the usual aviator warmth. "I need to see your passport and boarding pass immediately." Veronica looked up. She didn't flinch. She slowly reached into her blazer pocket, retrieved her passport, and handed it to him. "Dr. Roche," he read, glancing at the document. "My senior purser tells me there was an altercation in the galley. She claims you followed her, cornered her, and threw a beverage on her uniform." "That is an interesting fabrication," Veronica said, her voice steady. "But it is physically impossible, given the laws of physics and the layout of your galley." "I'm not here to debate physics," Banks snapped. "I'm here to ensure the safety of this flight. Lucia is a senior crew member with a spotless record. She says you are aggressive and intoxicated. I can smell alcohol on her uniform." "Yes," Veronica said. "You smell the Dom Perignon 2018 she was drinking on duty, which she dropped when I caught her. If you check the inventory, you will find a bottle open. If you check the galley floor, you will find the residue is concentrated near the jump seat, not near the entrance where I was standing." The captain paused. He looked back at Lucia. Lucia's eyes went wide. "She's lying, Roger," Lucia cried out from the galley, forgetting the formality of captain. "She knocked it out of my hand. She's trying to get me fired because I wouldn't give her free upgrades." Banks turned back to Veronica. "Look, Dr. Roche, we have 7 hours left to London. I don't have the resources to run a forensic investigation at 35,000 feet, but I have a crew member who feels threatened. Under FAA regulations and international aviation law, that's enough for me to restrain you if I have to." The threat hung in the air. Restrain. He meant duct tape and zip ties. Veronica slowly took off her reading glasses. She looked Roger Banks dead in the eye. "Captain Banks," she said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice that had negotiated billion-dollar settlements. "You are citing the Tokyo Convention of 1963 regarding powers of the aircraft commander. However, you are skipping the prerequisite of reasonable grounds. If you restrain me without corroborating evidence, you are opening Sovereign Airways to a liability suit that will eclipse your annual operating budget." Banks blinked. "Passengers didn't cite the Tokyo Convention. Furthermore," Veronica continued, "I formally invoke the Whistleblower Protection Clause of Sovereign Airways' own Operations Manual, Section 9, Paragraph 4. I am reporting a crew member for intoxication on duty. You are now legally obligated to preserve the evidence specifically, the open bottle and the spill pattern until we land. If you allow Lucia to clean that galley, you become an accessory to the cover-up." The captain was stunned. He looked at the woman in 1A. She wasn't shouting, she wasn't slurring. She was dismantling him with his own rulebook. "Who are you?" Banks whispered. "I am the person who is trying to save your career, Captain," Veronica said. "Go back to the cockpit. Fly the plane. Call authorities in London if you must. In fact, I insist on it. Have the Metropolitan Police meet us at the gate. But do not touch me, and do not let her come near me again." Banks stood there for a long moment, weighing the situation. He looked at Lucia, who was practically vibrating with malice in the galley. Then he looked at the calm, steel-spined woman in 1A. "Stay in your seat," Banks said gruffly. "If you move toward the galley again, we divert to Gander." "Do you understand?" "Perfectly," Veronica said. Banks walked back to the galley. Veronica heard him whispering harshly to Lucia. "Clean nothing," he hissed. "I want that bottle bagged. If she's right about the inventory, Lucia, I can't help you." "You're taking her side?" Lucia shrieked, though she tried to keep it quiet. "I'm taking the side of not getting sued," Banks retorted. "Just serve the rest of the cabin. Stay away from 1A. Chloe will handle her." The rest of the flight was a surreal exercise in isolation. Chloe, the young flight attendant, brought Veronica a bottle of water with trembling hands. "I'm sorry," Chloe whispered as she set the water down. She looked terrified. "You saw what happened, Chloe. Veronica said softly. I can't, Chloe stammered, tears welling in her eyes. Lucia is the union rep. She'll blacklist me. I'm on probation. The truth has a way of coming out, Chloe. Regardless of probation, Veronica said. Just remember that when they ask you. Chloe fled back to the galley. For 7 hours, Veronica sat in a pool of silence. The other passengers in first class glared at her, having heard only Lucia's version of events, that the crazy lady in 1A had attacked the crew. The man in the tracksuit, Brad, made a show of loudly thanking Lucia for her bravery every time she passed. Lucia preened under the attention. She spent the flight whispering to passengers, poisoning the well. She was building a jury of peers. She was confident. She had the captain's doubt, she had the crew's silence, and she had the aggressive passenger narrative locked down. As the plane began its descent into Heathrow, Lucia walked down the aisle for the final cabin check. She stopped at 1A. I hope you enjoyed the flight, Lucia said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Because the landing is going to be rough. I've messaged ground ops. The police are waiting. Veronica didn't look up from her iPad. Good. I'd hate to keep them waiting. London was gray. Rain lashed against the windows of the Boeing 777 as it taxied off the runway at Heathrow. The mood inside the cabin was electric with anticipation. The passengers knew something was happening. The rumor mill had churned for hours. Someone is getting arrested. The plane pulled into the gate, but the seatbelt sign didn't turn off. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Banks' voice crackled over the intercom. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We have authorities boarding the aircraft to deal with a security incident. We appreciate your patience. A collective gasp went through the cabin. People craned their necks to look at row 1. Lucia stood at the front of the cabin, arms crossed, a smug smile plastered on her face. She looked like an executioner waiting for the guillotine to drop. She caught the eye of the man in 2B and gave him a knowing wink. Watch this, the wink said. Watch me take out the trash. The airlock hissed. The heavy cabin doors swung open. The damp chill of London air rushed in, mixed with the smell of jet fuel. 2 officers from the Metropolitan Police stepped on board. They were wearing high-visibility jackets, their radios crackling. They looked serious. Lucia stepped forward immediately. Officers, she said, projecting her voice so the whole cabin could hear. Thank you for coming. She's in 1A. She assaulted me and threatened the flight deck. She pointed a manicured finger directly at Veronica. The first officer, a tall man with a buzz cut, looked at Lucia, then at the finger, then at Veronica. He didn't move toward seat 1A. He checked a clipboard he was holding. One moment, please, the officer said to Lucia, brushing past her. Behind the 2 police officers, a third man boarded. He was not police. He was wearing a charcoal wool coat over a navy suit. He held a black umbrella in one hand and a leather portfolio in the other. He had the sharp, terrified efficiency of a corporate executive who had been woken up at 4 a.m. by a very angry chairman. This was Arthur Pendleton, the station manager for Sovereign Airways at Heathrow. Lucia's smile faltered slightly. Why was the station manager here? Usually, for a disruptive passenger, it was just the cops. Arthur Pendleton didn't even look at Lucia. His face was pale. He scanned the cabin frantically until his eyes landed on seat 1A. He rushed forward, ignoring the police, ignoring the captain who had just stepped out of the cockpit. Dr. Roche? Arthur said, his voice breathless. Veronica unbuckled her seatbelt. She stood up, smoothing the creases in her trousers. She looked immaculate, regal, and entirely unbothered. Mr. Pendleton, I presume? Veronica asked. Yes, ma'am. I am so terribly sorry, Arthur stammered. Chairman Reynolds contacted me directly. He's on a video conference line in the VIP lounge. He wants to speak with you immediately. The silence in the first-class cabin was absolute. You could hear a pin drop on the carpet. Lucia's mouth fell open. The man in the tracksuit dropped his phone. Chairman Reynolds? Lucia whispered. Wait. Arthur? What is going on? That woman is a security threat. Arthur Pendleton turned slowly to look at Lucia. His eyes were wide with a mixture of disbelief and pity. Lucia, Arthur said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. Do you have any idea who this is? She's a passenger. She attacked me, Lucia insisted, though her voice was rising in pitch, the panic setting in. This, Arthur gestured to Veronica, is the external auditor for the Global Standards Committee. She is the woman who wrote the code of conduct you just violated, and she is the personal guest of the board. The blood drained from Lucia's face so fast it looked like she might faint. Veronica stepped into the aisle. She picked up her bag. She looked at the police officers. "Officers," Veronica said calmly, "I believe there has been a misunderstanding regarding the nature of the crime committed today. I am not the perpetrator. I am the victim of a Section 4 public order offense and a violation of aviation safety protocols regarding crew intoxication. I have digital evidence, and I would like to file a formal statement." The police officer nodded respectfully. "We can take that statement in the terminal, Dr. Roche." Veronica turned to Lucia. Lucia was shaking. The smugness was gone, replaced by the primal fear of a bully who has just realized they punched a wall of solid steel. "But," Lucia stammered, You were just sitting there. You didn't look like management." Veronica took a step closer to Lucia. She didn't shout. She spoke loud enough for the captain, the crew, and the nosy passengers to hear. "That is the problem, Lucia," Veronica said coolly. "You looked at me and decided what I was worth based on your own prejudices. You decided I was out of place. You decided I didn't belong in your world." Veronica leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper that cut like a razor. "But you forgot the first rule of survival in this industry. Never assume you are the most powerful person in the room, because now you're not just out of a job, you're out of a career." Veronica turned to the station manager. "Shall we go, Arthur? I have a board meeting to prepare for. And please, have someone escort the captain and the crew to the crew center. They are all suspended pending the investigation, including Captain Banks." "Me?" Captain Banks sputtered, stepping forward. "Now wait a minute. I followed protocol." "You allowed a flight attendant to fabricate a police report because it was easier than investigating the truth," Veronica said without looking back. "That's negligence, Captain. We'll discuss it at your hearing." Veronica walked off the plane, flanked by the station manager and one police officer. Lucia was left standing in the galley, the other police officer blocking her path. The passengers, who had been cheering her on hours ago, now looked at her with disgust. The illusion was shattered. "Lucia Price?" the remaining officer said, pulling out a notebook. "I need you to come with me. We need to breathalyze you. And then we need to talk about filing a false report." Lucia looked at the officer, then at the empty seat, 1A. She started to cry. But nobody offered her a tissue. The Sovereign Airways Operations Center at Heathrow was a fortress of glass and steel, usually reserved for coordinating logistics and managing crises. Today, Conference Room B had been converted into a war room. Veronica sat at the head of a mahogany table. She had had time to freshen up in the private suite. She was no longer just a passenger. She was the prosecutor. On the wall, a large screen displayed a live video feed from New York. It was Jonathan Reynolds, the chairman of the board. Across from Veronica sat Arthur Pendleton, the station manager, and Patricia Moore, the director of human resources for the UK division. They looked pale. They had seen the preliminary report Veronica had drafted during the car ride from the tarmac. "Let's be clear about the timeline," Veronica said, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. She tapped her iPad. "At 10:14 a.m. EST, I was denied a pre-departure beverage while the passenger in 2B was served. At 10:45 a.m., I was refused my pre-ordered meal. At 11:20 a.m., Senior Flight Attendant Price entered my personal space and used coded language, specifically the term out of place, to describe my presence in the cabin." Jonathan Reynolds spoke from the screen. His voice was gravelly and furious. "Patricia, do we have Price's file?" "Yes, Mr. Chairman," Patricia said, her hands shaking as she opened a thick folder. "It's extensive. Lucia has been with us for 15 years. She has 12 recorded complaints." Veronica raised an eyebrow. 12? Most were dismissed, Patricia added quickly. By her union representative, Hank Doherty. They were categorized as personality clashes or misunderstandings. The complainants were often junior staff or economy passengers. "And let me guess," Veronica said, leaning forward. "Were any of those complainants people of color?" Patricia hesitated. She flipped through the pages. The silence stretched, becoming suffocating. 7 of the 12, she whispered. "Pattern of behavior," Veronica stated. You have a senior purser who systematically targets specific demographics, and your internal review board led by her friend Mr. Doherty has been sweeping it under the rug. That makes the airline complicit. The door to the conference room opened. A security officer entered. Miss Roche? We have the preliminary results from the breathalyzer test administered by the police. Veronica nodded. Read it. Blood alcohol content was 0.04, the officer read. Under the legal limit for driving a car, perhaps, but well above the strict zero limit for flight crews operating an aircraft. She tested positive. Patricia gasped. She was drinking? On the flight? Dom Perignon 2018, Veronica supplied. Inventory will show 1 bottle opened, approximately 4 ounces missing, most of which is currently drying on the floor of the galley and on Lucia's shoes. This is immediate termination, Arthur Pendleton muttered, rubbing his temples. We don't even need a hearing for the alcohol. That's a hard line. No, Veronica said sharply. If you fire her for the alcohol, she'll claim addiction. She'll go to rehab. The union will fight for her reinstatement in 6 months. She'll be back on the line, terrorizing passengers, within a year. Jonathan Reynolds nodded on the screen. Veronica is right. We need to nail her on the conduct. We need to prove the intent. We need to prove she lied to the captain to endanger a passenger. It's her word against yours regarding the assault claim, though, Patricia pointed out weakly. She's still sticking to her story. She says you attacked her. Is it just her word? Veronica asked. She turned to the security officer. Bring in the junior flight attendant. Chloe. The door opened again. Chloe walked in. She looked like she had been crying for hours. She was still in her uniform, though she had taken off her scarf. She looked small in the large room. Sit down, Chloe, Veronica said gently. The ice in her voice melted instantly. She knew a victim when she saw one. Chloe sat. She wouldn't look at Arthur or Patricia. She looked only at Veronica. Chloe, Veronica said, I am not asking you to snitch on a colleague. I am asking you to tell the truth about what happened in the galley. If you lie to protect her, you are part of the conspiracy. If you tell the truth, you are a witness. And witnesses are protected. Chloe took a shaky breath. She told me to serve you last. Patricia started writing furiously. Go on, Veronica said. She said. Chloe's voice cracked. She said, watch me break her. She told me that people like you, that you get arrogant if we don't remind you who's in charge. She admitted to me that she marked your meal as not loaded in the system manually. I saw her do it on the iPad. And the drink? Veronica asked. The champagne? She was drinking it, Chloe whispered. She was celebrating. She called it her sanity juice. When you walked in, she got scared. She dropped the glass. You didn't touch her. You were standing 3 feet away. And the call to the captain? She made it up, Chloe sobbed. She hung up the phone and told me, if you say anything different, I'll make sure you never fly international again. She threatened my job, Dr. Roche. She said she's friends with the chief pilot. Veronica looked at Patricia. There it is, intimidation, falsifying records, racially motivated harassment, and filing a false safety report. Veronica stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the rain-slicked tarmac where planes were taking off, carrying thousands of people who trusted these crews with their lives. You have the evidence, Veronica said without turning around. Now, I want the tribunal. I want her to look me in the eye and explain why she thought she could get away with it. We can schedule the disciplinary hearing for tomorrow morning, Arthur suggested. No, Veronica said. Tonight, she's in the holding room. Captain Banks is in the crew lounge. Do it now. I have a meeting in the morning, and I want this cancer cut out of your company before I sign your new code of conduct. Jonathan Reynolds spoke from the screen. Make it happen, Arthur. Set up the boardroom. I'm flying in. I'll be there in 3 hours. But start without me. The boardroom at Sovereign Airways was designed to intimidate. It was a long, oval room with acoustic paneling that swallowed sound. At the center was a table that could seat 30. At 8 p.m., the tribunal began. On one side of the table sat the defense, Lucia Price, looking haggard and stripped of her authority. She was no longer wearing her blazer, just the blouse of her uniform. Next to her was Hank Doherty, the union representative, a man with a thick neck and a suit that fit poorly. He looked bored, as if this were just another routine complaint he would make disappear. Further down sat Captain Roger Banks. He looked nervous. He kept checking his watch. On the other side sat the panel. Arthur Pendleton, Patricia Moore, and the head of legal, a sharp-featured woman named Sarah Jenkins. And at the very head of the table, in the seat usually reserved for the CEO, sat Dr. Veronica Roche. When Lucia had walked in and seen Veronica in that chair, she had stopped dead in the doorway. Hank had to nudge her to keep moving. "Let's get this over with," Hank grumbled, opening his notebook. "My client is exhausted. She's been held for 4 hours without charge. We are filing a grievance for unlawful detention." "You can file whatever you like, Mr. Doherty," Sarah Jenkins said dryly. "But first, we are going to review the charges." "Charges?" Hank scoffed. "Allegations from an unruly passenger." "Dr. Roche is not a passenger," Patricia Moore corrected. "She is the presiding officer of this tribunal, appointed by the chairman of the board." Hank froze. He looked at Veronica. "She's what? You can't put the accuser in charge of the hearing. That's a conflict of interest." "It is a conflict," Veronica said, her voice calm and terrifying, "but not the way you think. I am not here as the victim, Mr. Doherty. I am here as the architect of the policy your client violated. I am the only person in this room qualified to interpret the severity of her actions." Veronica picked up a file. "Lucia Price, you are accused of gross misconduct, including but not limited to consumption of alcohol while on duty, falsification of flight logs, discriminatory harassment, and filing a false report to the flight deck." "Lies," Lucia spat. She found her voice shrill and defensive. "She's lying. She threatened me, and now she's using her fancy job to bully me." "Captain Banks," Veronica said, ignoring Lucia. She turned her gaze to the pilot. "Let's discuss your report. You stated that you restrained the passenger based on the purser's testimony. Did you visually verify the assault?" Banks shifted in his seat. Well, as I told you on board, I rely on my crew. Lucia has been with me for years. If she says she's unsafe..." "Did you verify the alcohol spill?" Veronica asked. "I saw a spill," Banks said. "I couldn't determine what it was." "Really?" Veronica pressed. "Because the cleaning crew found the broken stem of a champagne flute in the trash bin, wrapped in napkins. A bin you were standing next to when you spoke to Lucia." Banks turned red. "I was flying the plane. I didn't rummage through the trash." "We have the toxicology report," Patricia interrupted. "Lucia was positive for alcohol, 0.04. Hank Doherty blinked. He looked at Lucia. "You told me you hadn't touched a drop." It was mouthwash." Lucia lied, grasping at straws. "I used mouthwash because I was stressed." "Mouthwash doesn't smell like Dom Perignon," Veronica said. "And mouthwash doesn't explain why you told Chloe to deny Dr. Roche her meal." "Chloe is a liar," Lucia shrieked. "She's incompetent. I've been trying to get her fired for months. She's teaming up with her." "Chloe is not the only witness," Veronica said. She reached into her portfolio. "Do you know what this is, Lucia?" She held up a piece of paper. It was a printout of the digital logs from the in-flight entertainment system. "Modern aircraft are very connected," Veronica explained. "Every time you interact with a passenger's seat monitor from the main galley panel, it logs the action. At 10:48 a.m., there is a log entry from your login ID. Command, override meal selection 1A. Status, cancelled." The room went silent. This was the digital fingerprint. There was no explaining it away. "You manually went into the system and deleted my meal," Veronica said. "That is not a mistake. That is malice. You used company property to starve a passenger because you didn't like the way she looked." Lucia slumped in her chair. The fight was draining out of her. "And then," Veronica continued, "you told the captain I was aggressive. You tried to have me arrested. You tried to ruin my reputation and potentially my life. Do you know what happens to a black woman in America when she is dragged off a plane by police, Lucia? Do you know the danger you put me in?" Lucia looked down at the table. She didn't answer. "I asked you a question," Veronica said, her voice cracking like a whip. "I didn't think," Lucia whispered. "No, you didn't think I mattered," Veronica corrected. "You thought I was nobody. You thought you could treat me like trash and laugh about it in the galley." Veronica turned to Hank Doherty. "Mr. Doherty, in light of the toxicology report, the digital logs proving premeditated harassment, and the witness testimony regarding the false safety report, does the union wish to contest the termination?" Hank Doherty closed his notebook. He was a shark, but he knew when there was blood in the water, and it was his client's blood. He looked at Lucia with disdain. "The union cannot defend a member who consumes alcohol on duty," Hank said flatly. "That is a zero-tolerance violation. We withdraw our grievance." Lucia gasped. "Hank, you can't leave me." "You lied to me, Lucia," Hank said, standing up. "You said she was crazy. You didn't tell me you hacked the meal system. You're on your own." Hank walked out of the room. Lucia was alone. She looked small, pathetic, and utterly defeated. "Lucia Price," Arthur Pendleton said formally. "Your employment with Sovereign Airways is terminated, effective immediately. You are stripped of all seniority and pension benefits related to conduct dismissals. You will surrender your badge and ID now." Lucia's hands trembled as she unpinned her wings, the gold wings she had worn for 15 years. She placed them on the table. They made a hollow clink. "And Captain Banks," Veronica said. The pilot jumped. I didn't know," Banks stammered. "Ignorance is not a defense for a captain," Veronica said. "You allowed a toxic environment to fester on your aircraft. You threatened a passenger with restraints without investigation. You are suspended pending a full review of your command capabilities. I suggest you hire a lawyer." Banks looked at Lucia with pure hatred. If looks could kill, Lucia would be dead. He had lost his command because he protected a bully. "Get them out of here," Veronica said, waving her hand. Security stepped forward. Lucia was escorted out, sobbing, her mascara running down her face, a mess of a woman who had woken up that morning thinking she ruled the sky, only to find herself grounded, permanently. Veronica sat back in the chair. The room was quiet. "Is it over?" Patricia asked softly. "No," Veronica said, looking at the empty doorway. "That was just the cleanup. Now comes the message. We need to make sure every employee in this company knows exactly why Lucia Price isn't flying tomorrow." She picked up her pen. "Let's draft the press release." The firing of Lucia Price was not a quiet affair. In the corporate world, dismissals are usually shrouded in non-disclosure agreements and vague memos about pursuing other opportunities. But Dr. Veronica Roche didn't believe in vague memos. She believed in transparency. 2 days after the incident, Sovereign Airways released a company-wide bulletin. It was titled, "Commitment to Excellence, Zero Tolerance for Bias and Harassment." It didn't name Lucia directly, legal wouldn't allow that, but the details were unmistakable. It cited a senior crew member terminated for racially motivated service refusal, falsification of safety reports, and violation of substance protocols. The airline industry is a small world. Within hours, the flight attendant forums and WhatsApp groups were buzzing. "Did you hear about Lucia? She tried to get a passenger arrested, and it turned out the passenger was the one writing the new rulebook. She got fired, pension gone, everything." The story leaked to the press. A travel blogger who had been in seat 3A on that flight posted a video titled, "I watched a flight attendant melt down and get destroyed by a queen in 1A. It went viral instantly. But for Veronica, the victory wasn't in the viral video or the termination. It was in the work. 6 months later, Veronica stood on a stage in London. She was addressing the annual general meeting of Sovereign Airways. The room was filled with shareholders, executives, and press. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the new Sovereign Promise, a set of passenger rights she had codified. "We often talk about luxury in this industry," Veronica said into the microphone, her voice commanding the room. "We talk about thread counts, champagne vintages, and lie-flat seats. But true luxury is not about things. It is about dignity." She paused, making eye contact with Jonathan Reynolds in the front row. "Dignity is the feeling that when you step onto an aircraft, you are seen as a human being, not a demographic. It is the assurance that no matter who you are or what you look like, the rules apply to you fairly. Last winter, that dignity was breached on one of our flights. And we fixed it. Not just by removing a bad apple, but by chopping down the diseased tree and planting something new." The applause was polite at first, then thunderous. After the speech, Veronica walked through the reception hall. She was stopped by a young woman in a Sovereign Airways uniform. It was Chloe. Chloe looked different. She stood taller. She wore the pin of a senior purser, a promotion that usually took years, but had been fast-tracked due to her integrity and performance during the transition. "Dr. Roche," Chloe said, beaming. Hello, Chloe. You look well, Veronica smiled. I wanted to thank you, Chloe said. The new reporting system. It works. We had a captain try to bully a gate agent last week. I filed a report. HR called me within an hour. He was suspended. It's actually changing. Veronica touched Chloe's arm. Culture doesn't change because of rules, Chloe. It changes because of people who are brave enough to enforce them. You're the change. Chloe blushed. Oh, and I heard about Lucia. Veronica's expression didn't change. Oh? She's working at a call center in Manchester, Chloe whispered. A friend of mine saw her. She takes complaints for a cable company. Apparently, she hates it. She tells everyone she used to fly first class. She did used to fly first class, Veronica said, looking toward the exit. But she forgot that the most important part of flying isn't the altitude, it's the attitude. And gravity always wins in the end. Veronica walked out of the hall, into the cool London evening. Her driver was waiting. She had a flight to catch in the morning back to New York. She checked her app. Seat 1A. This time, she knew the service would be impeccable. So, what's the takeaway here? Lucia Price had spent 15 years thinking her uniform gave her the right to judge people. She looked at Dr. Veronica Roche and saw someone out of place. But the only thing out of place was Lucia's ego. She picked a fight with the one person who held the keys to her career, and she lost everything because of it. It's a brutal reminder. Treat everyone with respect. Not because you never know who they are, but because it's the right thing to do. You never know when the person you're mistreating is the one writing your paycheck or your termination letter. If you enjoyed this story of high-altitude justice, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into real-life drama and karma. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been judged by someone who had no idea who you really were? I want to hear your stories. Until next time, fly safe and stay humble.